Keith Porter, Geraldo Lunas Campos, Victor Manuel Diaz, Paradi La, Luis Beltran Inez Cruz, Aber Sanchez Dominguez, Luis Gustavo, Nunes Carceres, Renee Nicole Good, and Alex Pretti. This is a list of the people who have died while in immigration and customs hands just in 2026. Literally just today, as we're recording, it is Tuesday, January 27th. So in just 27 days, this is the list of people who have died. People have been murdered at the hands of our state. We have reached a inflection point. We have beyond reached an inflection point, one might say, with respect to what we see taking place in Minneapolis. The time, I believe, for one might say pious platitudes has passed. I think we are confronted with the reality that we are living within a state, a system where people are trying to morally and theologically justify terrorizing citizens. And please make no mistake, this is not a critique of law enforcement or the military or anything like that. Because if you were to watch one of these videos, what you would see clearly is that these are not fully trained people, agents. These look more like gangs roaming around, picking fights, escalating a situation rather than de-escalating a situation. So what are we called to do? How are we called to respond in this current social moment? I would say whatever response we have, it is going to look somewhat like what we saw Alex do. We are called to stand in the gap, to stand between those who are being unjustly treated, to protect them, to literally shield them, to ask them, even if it is our last words, are you okay? This is what it means to be a Christian. My hope is that this doesn't cost any of our lives, but we'd be foolish to believe that it may not, given what's happening. In today's episode, we're going to discuss what's taking place in Minnesota, how people are processing it, how we are thinking about it, and quite honestly, what people on the ground are doing to resist it, because they are resisting. They are resisting what's taking place in that space. And what we see here, quite honestly, is two manifestations, two different perspectives on what it means or what we believe when we talk about God. Do you believe God to be this authority figure that we ought to just follow obediently and do everything they say, in as much as we grant this authority to an outside state agency? That we grant this authority to people who claim to be leaders and followers of Jesus, and therefore have this power by which they believe they can wield on American citizens and not be held accountable? Or do we follow the teachings of Jesus and see God in the people? As Matthew 25 reminds us, when I was naked and you gave me clothes, when I was hungry and you gave me food, when I was in prison, you came and visited me. These are the people we find that represent Christ. These are the people that we are called to serve. That is my hope and my prayer, that we'll be inspired to resist this Christo-fascist moment. Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christian Podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians, and we are exactly the same kind of Christians who will show up into your church and protest if one of your pastors happens to be the director of an ICE facility. So if you're curious about what a socially and politically progressive Christianity looks like, this is the podcast for you. My name is Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter, and I'm your host. I'm a professor of theology and the lead pastor of the Lost Faith community in Los Angeles, California. And today I am joined by
Reverend Blair,
Everest,
and Julia.
I was a little bit spicy on that. So sorry, because I was mad that they arrested the woman who
they
organized.
her. Of course they did.
And then the AI changed her face to me like the
it looked like she's crying.
Yeah,
and the White House reposted it because everything's a nightmare. How is this real life?
Yeah, that's fair. So it's I don't know. I think I wasn't surprised, but just disappointed. I think I was just like, man, someone who's, because I think I always like to show my students when I'm teaching my theology class the picture. There's a really famous picture of the Klan all lined up in a church where they all have the Klan hoods on, and behind them it says, maybe it says "In God We Trust" or something
It
like
says
that.
Jesus
Yeah,
saves.
Jesus saves. Yeah, Jesus saves. And you're just like, Jesus saves. And they're all, and so, if y'all haven't seen this picture, I guess we can find that. But it's a pretty well known picture. You probably know what I'm talking about. So we have to recognize that there's always been theologically justified state sanctioned violence. And that's what we are dealing with today. This isn't, I don't know how to phrase this other than to say, I hate having the fact that we have to have this episode. Like, I absolutely hate it. Like, it is.
We just had this episode. We just did this.
The
2
thing
episodes
that
ago.
What makes this different in my mind than what happened with Renee is that in a very serious way is because he had a gun and because he had it holstered and had the permit to carry and everything that he was supposed to be able to do correct, and all the people that were like, stood up and were caping for Kyle Rittenhouse when he took a giant machine gun to a counter protest when and end up murdering people, are the same folks out here saying, well, this guy shouldn't have brought a gun to a protest, even though he didn't pull the gun out. Right. And so you have this convergence of people who claim to be about Second Amendment, right? Who claim to be about the right to bear arms, people who you can clearly see who are and who are not in good faith. And to be fair, before I turn it over to y'all, the NRA actually said, hey, we need to investigate this because the NRA actually is calling out Republicans who are saying this person or question this person's right to bear arms. So at least they're being, in their very twisted way, morally consistent. But
Which this is the second time in the last calendar year that I have had to kind of give the NRA props, which I
which
hate.
feels weird.
I hate it. But they did the same thing when they were saying that the government was saying that trans people shouldn't have guns, and the NRA was like, actually, everyone should be allowed to have guns. And I was like, I hate that, but I do, there's integrity. There's integrity there.
And just to clarify, we are spending this episode talking about the recent stories that have continued to come out of Minneapolis. So we started off talking there about Alex Pretti and the killing of Alex Pretti. We're going to talk about some of the detention of children. And then we're also going to try to tell you the good news, the organizing, the networking that's happening on the ground and what resistances look like. Part of what we want to make sure we do in this episode is to give you some accurate information with sources, because we know that misinformation has been spreading really rampantly. And so we jumped right in, referencing some of what's happened, but just want to clarify, as we were getting started, we were talking there about the killing of Alex Pretti. And we're gonna try to give you sources as much as we can through this episode in the show notes so that you know where our information is coming from. But Everest, I know you really wanted to talk about this misinformation and how quickly the story is getting spun.
Well, so as listeners may or may not know, I work with the youth here at our church. So I do the middle and high school program. And just like with Renee Good, immediately after Alex Pretti died, the administration was coming forward and saying a bunch of stuff that is just not true. And it is so strange that they keep doing that when we have so much video documentation. But the thing that impacted me was that on Sunday, I had 2 or 3 kids that were like, well, the guy that got shot yesterday had a gun or was pointing a gun at the officers, and in kind of I think in like a young brain way of trying to make sense of why another person was killed in cold blood, which is very sad, but especially because these are kids that are coming from progressive families. Like, I mean, they're young and the misinformation is reaching them, but like, it just made me really think about how hard it is to parse through any of the rhetoric when the misinformation is so loud, and especially I mean, I am glad that those kids were not watching the videos. I mean, it's like horrendous. Even videos not of him directly getting shot, but I think just watching a video of anyone and knowing that it's their last moments is a really painful thing. So that really struck me, and we had a conversation about it. But then the truth is also really bleak, and talking to kids and being like, no, he was actually just defending someone, and he was shot 10 times, and he did have a concealed carry permit, but he did not get out the gun at any point during that interaction.
And he was disarmed. They disarmed him and then beat him with the gun before they shot him. I think for me, and I think people in my community, I can't speak for all of the Black people, but certainly for a good number of us, this is all very familiar. This is not news. This is not like particularly shocking, because for my entire life, people are shot, executed in broad daylight. Like I was 17 years old when the first person that I knew was killed on his knees on the street, shot in the back of the head, like an execution. This is not new for me. I understand, maybe, I understand how difficult it must be for white people to reckon with it when it is. I was raised to see it, and I understand if you were raised to not believe it, that it is cognitive dissonance that makes it very difficult to wrap your mind around what your eyes are seeing.
Yeah, Blair, I'm gonna toss it to you, but I think this is one of the times where I think there's a race class intersection, because I would also include Julia, like poverty is such a descriptor, because the neighborhood, like there were white people who were in the neighborhood I grew up in who didn't trust the police because of what you just described, right? And so poverty, and again, because poverty correlates to race in this country so many different ways, I think is that what has been the equalizer, I guess, in this sense, when it comes to like your experience of I mean, the thing is, like, and maybe we can find this, there's an influencer on Instagram who had a really good, it was like a 3-minute clip. And Julie, I may have sent this to you, I don't even know, where he basically talks about how he's satirically talking about how, like, it feels
Wouldn't
crazy.
That be crazy? Wouldn't
He's
that
like,
make you feel crazy?
Would it make you feel crazy if you know what the government is saying is a lie, but no one believes you? If you're saying that's actually not what happened, but everybody's
you're
like,
watching
well,
it with your own eyes, and the
and then the
government is saying that wouldn't that make you feel crazy?
Wouldn't that make you like question your own sanity? And that's essentially ostensibly what's been happening to Black and brown, overly policed and poor communities for like decades, right? And so
centuries.
Yeah. And so I think that is the hard part. And so I have something I want to say about what Everest said earlier, but Blair, I want to toss to you, because I know you had wanted to chime in as well.
Well, I think Everest wanted to respond to Julia first. Jump in.
Well, I was gonna say, there's a white lady that tweeted something. I will not name her because she's received a lot of internet hate and apparently lost her job. Okay, but her tweet was, "Can we just go back to normal police brutality?" Which is like a really sickening thing to say. And I think that, Julia, you're just right, that I'm very aware of like how people are reacting to specifically the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Pretti in a way that all of the other names that we listed at the beginning of this episode even are not being felt in the same way. And so many of the people who died in detention centers last year have not been kind of memorialized in the same way. And I just hope that this is like, rather than those two deaths feeling different and people not articulating why, white people not articulating why, I hope that there is a real reckoning with like what liberation means for all of us, and the ways that any violent system that is killing people is harmful to everyone. Like I just hope that there is like a real I hope that this can be a consciousness shift instead of just a like, I can't believe it's happening now to people that look like me when I thought I would always be safe. I hope it's like, whoa, this actually has been happening for a long time. And I just had a real failure of empathy and now I have it. That's what I'm praying for people.
I mean, that's absolutely, I talk about developmental theory and developmental psychology, but the idea of like we grow in our awareness of justice, and the awakening moment often comes when you can see yourself in the story, and that is why a lot of white people are suddenly responding in a different way. But the deepening of that, we hope, is that as you continue in the justice development journey, you do start to realize, oh, as Julia said, oh, actually, the government's been lying to us for a very long time, and we're not actually crazy. It's just been a false narrative. What I wanted to add, Everest, to think about the context of your young people trying to cling to some reason why this happened and to find some justification, is we have talked about in our church community how to be a bystander and what it looks like to be an observer as ICE is detaining immigrants, and as ICE has been active in our city in Los Angeles for a year now. We have encouraged our people to do exactly what Alex Pretti did, which was get your phone out, point it at them, stand close, let them know you're observing them. And he was murdered for that. And I think if you are hearing your pastor and people of authority tell you this is the thing you are supposed to do, and then you find out someone is being murdered for that, your brain is going to try to do whatever it can to not think that you are now under threat. And that includes trying to create justification for why violence is deserved. The reality is violence was not deserved in this moment. And as many bodies have been under threat for a very long time, more bodies are under threat now.
Another thing I want to add to what you said, and I want to point back to one of our previous episodes, number 30, they like the lying, because I think I haven't recorded anything on social media forever because I just have too much going on. But this sociological aspect of it was really interesting when we did the podcast last year. I thought about doing something again on it, and we'll post the show in there and some links to it. But basically, the supporters like it when the president and these people lie immediately, because it gives them a way to deflect and distract from what's happening. They believe they can interpret the truth, right? So it's intentional. They lie so that so I don't even call it misinformation. They just lying, right? They just out here lying. They're lying. And so it's that way the kids come and say the wrong things. And so that they give people talking points to critique. Now, their supporters know they're lying. They know what they're doing. They know that you're giving us the information we need to create a false narrative to protect ourselves, to do the thing we really want to do. The problem is, psychologically, like neuroscience, is when at some point when you keep lying like this, you become unable to distinguish the truth from a lie. Like that's just what your brain does. And so this is the problem that we're at. If you want to read a good book on this, it's called 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. Super easy, but by neuroscience, really well-respected neuroscientist. And I think this is the challenge that we are in. And so my frustration, and then Blair, I want to talk to you because I know I want to get to some other stuff around just the way this is impacting kids, and to an extent, I guess this does lead into that. I talked to Isaiah like a little bit about what happened, because we have conversations about police, because Isaiah is like, he's in first grade. He's like 4 feet 4 inches. Like he's already like a friggin' giant, eats like a grown adult, and so like he's going, I'm gonna have a skinny but tall black kid. And I'm like, I know what that does. I know when you're the tall person in class, how that stands you out. And he has to be, even at his age, he has to learn. And it sucks. And Blair, you said something the last time, a few weeks ago when we were talking, which I had not even realized, when you said when white parents talk about giving the talk, it's about sex. And when black parents do it, it's about the police. And I was like, I swear to God, I had no idea that's what y'all was talking about. Y'all talking about sex. I'm like,
Yep.
I was like, what? I'm like, my parents, the The full now I'm not saying they should have done this. The full extent of my talk about sex was don't get anybody pregnant.
Don't come back here pregnant. Don't bring no babies over here.
That was the beginning and the end. I digress. But the talk was about police. It was about authority, not even just police, but like how to interact with authority figures to not get yourself in more trouble, right? And so that just when you said that, I was like, wow, that is two Americas right there. Because I was
white parents don't even have a conversation about authority figures besides authority figures are good, do what the police tell you to do.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about kids, I think that's another line that people are realizing has been crossed. That has been crossed many, many moons ago. We have been detaining children alone in immigration detention centers since the Biden or since the Obama era, right? So this is not an invention of Trump, but the amount of children who are being detained has increased significantly in the last year. And so we did want to talk about some of the cases that are coming out of Minnesota as well. We've read about Liam Conejo Ramos, who's a 5-year-old who was detained. He was coming home with his father. ICE surrounded his car, took him and his father out. They claim they were trying to return him to his mother by taking him up to the door. Observers have video and have given testimony that no, they went to the door trying to convince them to open the door so that more people would come out. They were basically using this poor little boy as bait. To get more of his family to come out so more people could be detained. Instead of returning him to a family member who is a citizen who came out, provided documentation, and said, please give me the boy, don't take him with you. They refused to turn him over. The superintendent of schools was on site when this happened and also tried to take custody of Liam. DHS refused to turn over custody. Liam is now being held in the South Texas Detention Center, which is where a lot of children and families in detention are being held. There's also a case of a 2-year-old who is the child of Elvis Tipon Echeverria. I apologize for probably butchering the pronunciation of that name. A 2-year-old, very similar story. ICE surrounded the car. She was in with her father. They broke out the windows with the 2-year-old in a car seat in the back, detained both of them. They tried to get the mother to come out and retrieve the child. The mother was too afraid to come out and retrieve her child because she knew she also would be detained if she left the house. A judge actually put a stay of deportation on both Elvis and his daughter, and they were put on a commercial flight and deported anyway. So the lawyer for the family also was given permission by the judge to take possession of the 2-year-old, to take custody, and that basically DHS just denied it, just said, nope, we don't care. They're already on a plane. We also know the story of a 17-year-old who was kidnapped in the entrance of a Target where he worked. He was beaten and thrown out of the vehicle by ICE agents several blocks away when they realized he was, in fact, a U.S. citizen. We know that in the last year, in 2025, the Marshall Project has told us 3,800 children were detained, which is more than the previous 4 years of immigration detention combined. And 1,300 children in 2025 were held for longer than 30 days because usual policy requires that they be released to foster care or family member or deported within 72 hours. And if they're not, according to the law, supposed to hold children under the age of 18 for more than 30 days in detention, we know that they have been anyway. There have also been images from the South Texas Detention Center of children crying out, "Let us out." We're also getting human rights reports that the food is contaminated, the water is contaminated, children are getting sick. And these images, if they're not breaking your heart and making you realize that we have far, far crossed a line of human dignity, I don't know what will.
So I there's a couple things I want to say. This is not about following the law. This is all they try to make it sound like, oh, it's about making sure these people are following the law. It's not about enforcing the law because they're constantly breaking the laws. So it's not about that. It's not about immigration. right? It's not about illegal immigrants, because we know there are more quote unquote undocumented immigrants in Texas than there are in Minnesota, right? They went to Minnesota because Minnesota wouldn't give them the SNAP rolls, people who are on SNAP, and the people who were on the voter registration rolls. That's what Pam Bondi just said. That's what it would take for them to leave. It has nothing to do with immigration and everything to do with politics. And this, right? This is what authoritarianism looks like. This is fascism when someone says, I'm going to send a gang, right, to a city because you're not willing to do something I want to do politically on the pretense of immigration, when we know, when the data says there's more undocumented immigrants in Texas. And you know why they're not doing it in Texas? Because there's more. They don't want to lose that. They don't want to lose those votes. Because if what was happening in Minneapolis was happening in Dallas or happening in anywhere else in Texas, that state would turn blue like any other place, because this is immoral. It is illegal and it is immoral. And that is what is just beyond frustrating to me. This everything they are saying it was about is an obvious lie, right? And so it frustrates me when I see mainstream news or anybody try to engage these people as though they are speaking anything that is remotely truthful. When you just accept that they're lying, call them out on their lies and move on, right? And I think that for me, when we try to pretend that we are having a conversation with someone who has a kind of moral ground, that you've already ceded them territory that they do not deserve. This I'm sorry. I'm so angry.
No, let it out.
I'm so angry about the stuff with the kids.
Really upsetting.
It is. I just don't know how anybody. You don't have to have children to imagine what it would be like for that 5-year-old who's going to remember this to have gone through what they've gone through. Like, that's insane. And for anybody to try to justify that, and think about the impact that has on the superintendent, on the people who are there trying to save that child. It is unconscionable. It is immoral. And if you believe that, if you're defending this on any grounds that is theological, under some kind of guise of nuance, if you're unwilling to make a moral commitment to say this is evil, then you are a coward. You have a degree of cowardice that is unwilling to actually stand up and see the image of God in others. Your beliefs are not in alignment with what you proclaim to have faith in. Julia?
How do you make a moral argument to people who have no morals?
Yeah. I mean, you can't, the thing is, you can't argue with them because they've already decided that they're not being morally consistent. What you're trying to do is, I would argue, is persuade the Christians who aren't saying anything, right? Like the people who are like, so for instance, we got this email from one of our listeners, Alyssa, who from in Iowa, and her church, they're hours away from what's happening. And there are people in her church who want to be out doing, they're trying to find ways to participate. And their pastor is just like, he's clearly more moderate than them, right? And so we want to engage those people, right, to give them the kind of tools they need, because our political leaders are gone. But
we don't have any. There are no political leaders.
Blair.
Well, this is why I still study evangelism, because I think it actually takes a conversion. It's a conversion of worldview.
Because back to evangelism right there.
Because we're thinking about, what is it you actually claim as soteriology? What is it that saves us? What is the ultimate thing that you turn to? And for some of these folks, they can look at children who are being detained and dehumanized and say, well, they were born evil. And they have, their parents didn't do what was necessary to save them. They didn't get them baptized. They didn't teach them how to follow the rules. They didn't teach them to kowtow to authority. And they were born evil, so they stay evil, so they're getting what they deserve. That requires a fundamental reorientation of your understanding of who God is and how we are related to God, to break up that idea that children deserve what they get because they were born evil. I don't believe that children are born evil. I think they are born into a world where evil is an option. And children suffer under that evil. And children certainly can choose evil, right? They can choose to do horrendous things. But 99.99% of children are not choosing evil. They are making their way in a world where evil is always an option to them. And it is our job to make sure it does not overcome them and that they learn how to choose God instead of evil. And so to put children continuously into positions where they're being dehumanized and being taught that that is what the world will offer them, they are more likely to choose dehumanization of others in the future. So rather than saving those children by punishing them, which is what I think a lot of people in this theological camp would say, we are entrenching them in evil.
Breeding evil.
Instead of offering them a path to flourishing. And that itself is evil.
Yep.
To punish these children is evil.
It's abuse. Everest?
I agree. I also just think I just want to be careful about being like, they have no morals. I agree. I think that there are extremely, evil things going on. I think that a lot.
I guess we want to be clear about who we're saying they, because when I'm saying they, I'm talking about people like Stephen Miller, people like J.D. Vance, people like Christy Nome, like people they don't.
Architects of this.
We're not reasoning with the architects. Yeah. I agree. I don't think that's happening. I think that like every time that people are actually coming around. I think like it's happening slowly. It's not happening on the internet. I don't think that it's happening like super visibly, but I think that like more and more people who have considered themselves centrist are actually seeing the horrendous things happening to children. They are waking up to people being killed by those who allegedly are protecting them. They are like, I don't know. I think that I just believe that humans naturally are inclined towards empathy and towards protecting each other. And I think that the supporters of what is going on oftentimes have like created such a intense armor of fear and have somehow convinced themselves that the evils that they're seeing are necessary to protect them and to protect the ones that they love.
Yes.
And I think that more and more, like, I think that the reasoning that can happen with them isn't an intellectual argument, but I think it is like finding a way to crack through that hardness that has built up, because I just really believe that there is an empathy and a compassion there. And the more that we are able to be like, no, this is your neighbor. These are, I think like Blair said, it is a conversion and it's a breaking open that is required that will not happen through reason, but I believe is possible through God.
Through God.
And through relationship.
Yeah, through relationship. I mean, this is what we talked about a few weeks ago, I think, similarly, when we talked about going to talk to home for holidays to talk to conservative family members, right? Like it's finding shared values. And I think that, so I guess when we're talking about the reason I point to the politicians is because those are the people that we can hold accountable, right? Because they are not being morally consistent. Like they are lying to appease. Quite honestly, I believe they're lying to appease Stephen Miller, who I think is actually one might say like the prime minister of the country. But that's just, we're not a political podcast, but that's basically what it is. And so that's why they're terrible at their jobs, because they're terrible liars, and they just say what they think needs to be said to fit a broader legal narrative. They keep calling people domestic terrorists because then they think they can get away with doing what they're doing, and they might. Quite honestly, they might. I'm not going to pretend that they won't. But now we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. I want to talk a little bit about like what people are doing to resist what's happening. And what I think, I would say, I'm going to start with like how I think this moment is somewhat different than the previous moments that we've experienced in the past. I do think this is a turning point, and hopefully it's sustainable. So we'll be right back in just a moment. Thanks for listening to the Progressive Christians podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. If you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate, subscribe, and leave a comment. As you all know, last week we were super excited to announce the capabilities of people being able to donate to become a supporter of our podcast. We are grateful for those of you who've already signed up, for those of you who've already contributed, and we want to invite you to please consider being a supporter. You should know that all your donations, because we are a church-sponsored ministry, you're donating to a nonprofit, so they are tax deductible. You can find a link to make your donation in the show notes. While a one-time donation would be great, we would also love if you could sign up to be a monthly supporter, like $5, $10 a month. I mean, $5, it'd be great. Like literally whatever you can give, we would truly, truly appreciate it. We've intentionally decided to choose the supporter model because we don't want to deny anyone access to the great content we plan to create. And we have things in the works that we're trying to figure out to continue to produce more content. But in order to do that, we do need your financial support. If you have any ideas of the content you might like us to create or ways for us to get together and to gather, please send us an email and let us know. You can email us at progressivechristians@theloftla.org. Thanks, and we'll get back to the show. Welcome back to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the loving neighbor kind of Christians and not the storm the Capitol kind. We are continuing our conversation around the things that are taking place in Minneapolis, the death of the murder of Alex Pretti. And Everest, you had started this podcast a while ago talking about hoping that it's different. And maybe thinking that maybe it's different because the fact that Renee Good and Alex are white. And I do think that obviously plays a part. That's just, we can't get away from that. But where I think I see parallels between this and what happened on Bloody Sunday, the march from Selma to Montgomery, is because there are so many people out recording. And this is different than Renee's. They have angles on this. Like it's like watching a movie. You know what I'm saying? They have put it together where you're like, oh no, you can't even pretend to like the lives with Renee. You could find a video that might make you think, oh, okay, this one's like, no, this is obvious. Y'all, he was protecting a woman getting, pepper sprayed. Then you cold clocked him. You knocked him down. He's still making sure she okay. He starts to fall. His gun is revealed. You disarm him and then you shoot him. Right? That's what gangs do. And so I think because it looks so much like what a gang does, and it's so, and it was so, because the way it has been captured, I think that, like similar to what King learned, is when people see that, it creates such a level of both disgust and fear that it begins to shame people to respond differently. And this has been a civil rights tactic. King got this from, the Indian civil rights movement in India from the British Empire. And so I know we have some things we want to talk about what people are doing, but Blair, I'll let you finish up and kind of roll us into that segment.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to do, is roll us into the reality that we are having a different experience of what happened to Alex Pretti because there are more people on the streets recording. There are more people who understand the critical nature of documenting what is happening so that the lies can be unveiled. And Minnesota truly has just done, Minneapolis, St. Paul, they've just done an incredible job of organizing their communities and responding really quickly and networking in really powerful ways. And so I know we're going to talk about some of those, but it is a different moment because people are continuing to show up and more people are continuing to show up and more people are willing to risk to reveal the lies. I can't stop thinking about the woman in the pink jacket. If people have seen the different videos of Alex Pretti's murder, the woman in the pink jacket she's terrified, but she holds her phone steady. She walks closer. She understands she has to capture this moment. And I can't imagine the courage it took for her not to run away. And we're seeing that more and more, just people standing up and being courageous in the moment.
I also think it's important to remember that 2020 was where we lost George Floyd. And it was a very serious moment for the world. And in that time, Minnesota organized.
Yep.
And those systems have remained in place. So the reason that it has been so efficient is because of 2020 and because the work was done and has been maintained. And it shows what long-term organizing can accomplish because they are successfully resisting. They are holding resistance. And in my mind, they are the front line because like if they weren't doing this, what they're doing there will be rolled out everywhere that they have the might to do so. And they're like, Minnesota is like holding strong. They're like holding the line.
Well, they're the front line, and other cities are also watching and learning from them. I think I actually feel like, I feel so much reverence for the people of Minnesota right now. I'm so proud of them. I love them so much. I think, but even in the last week, I have gone to a few different like LA neighborhood meetings, and people are distributing whistles, and people are distributing zines, and people are talking to their neighbors and like preparing in this way that feels so radical and offline and very like, I think we are also finding a cool balance of like people are filming and people are staying locked in on documenting the truth of what they're actually seeing, and also a lot of people are watching Minnesota and taking that into their own neighborhoods and their own corners of at least of this city, and I feel certain that it's happening in other cities as well.
I was just going to name some of the things that we've been seeing come out of Minnesota that maybe were happening on smaller scale here in LA or in other cities. But as people are learning about it, they're realizing, oh, that is something I could do. Like I can't get on the front lines of a protest, but that's a thing I can do. So things like bringing food delivery to immigrant families so they don't have to leave their homes, doing rent collection, doing mutual aid to pay rent so that families who can't leave their homes, can't get to work, are not going to get evicted. They are putting together escorts to walk kids to school. They've been setting off car alarms when they see ICE. Obviously, the whistles have become a strong sound as well. One of my favorite things is that starting this last weekend, instead of inviting everyone to come to a centralized vigil, they've started having community vigils on every street corner. And this is really encouraging micro-organizing because somebody from across town can't show up to respond to ICE on your doorstep, but somebody next door can. And so every night at 7 p.m., they're coming out and lighting candles and encouraging communities to get to know each other. And I think, again, this is something that's different about Minneapolis than Chicago, than LA, than other places where these raids have been happening. Is Minneapolis is less segregated than our cities are. And so I know that part of what's happened in LA is people are asking me, well, what's it like with the raids? And like, I don't live in that neighborhood, so I don't know. And to get to that neighborhood for me would be a 40-minute drive. And like, I'm not a helpful person in that moment. And in Minneapolis, it's so majority white that even the immigrant communities are interspersed amongst these majority white communities. And so there are more people of privilege interspersed and able to show up in these networks. I'm not saying that we can't also create those networks in more segregated cities, but it takes a little bit more intentionality and a little bit more trust building to be able to do that effectively.
And I think the impact of 2020 has played a big part. Or no, Julia, you had mentioned that, and that it laid the groundwork, and because it already partly radicalized people, and I think it also interestingly created a better relationship with them with law enforcement. So they're ready. They know these people aren't law enforcement. Like it's like, and so you see what you also see is it ushered in a new shift of cops where you see police chiefs being like, these people ain't doing it right. Minneapolis is really showing us what love looks like, what it really means to be in solidarity with one another. And again, I talk about seeing the image of God in our communities. I think that's so important, is that we see God where it says where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. So they're, like, I think recognizing that is where we see God, and not in these authoritarian, top-down brutality, divine, kingly ways in which we describe God.
We're also seeing clergy organize really well in Minneapolis and Minnesota. And again, because of these existing networks, there was an invitation that went out, which also happened in 2020, for clergy to come and bear witness to what was happening in Minneapolis. And they issued that again through networks of interfaith clergy organizing. And so last weekend, in response to the killing of Renee Good, before the killing of Alex Pretti, clergy showed up in Minneapolis to engage in some intentional civil disobedience. Over 100 clergy were arrested at the Minneapolis airport because deportations have been taking place on commercial flights. And so they shut down the airport entrance. Again, remember, it's like negative degrees in these places too. And so folks are bundled up, but still showing up. And it's such a powerful image of these interfaith clergy from different kinds of denominations and different kinds of faith backgrounds wearing their religious garb over their thick jackets and gloves and being arrested as they bear witness. There was also a movement started by clergy who decided to sit in at the Target headquarters, because Target is headquartered in Minneapolis. They decided to sit in, and there's some videos of them singing protest songs and hymns to basically say, you're not going to get rid of us. You as a corporation need to stand up and take a stance on this. And so clergy started that movement, and then it has grown and grown and grown. And so the sit-in just expanded at Target. And finally, this last weekend, Target participated in a release, a letter from businesses in Minneapolis, an open letter calling for de-escalation, and Target signed on to that. And that, for corporations to cross the government, can be kind of risky, but the pressure started by clergy and people of faith building out into broader communities is making a difference.
Which I'll say to our listeners, look into interfaith organizing in your cities. I think that is a way that, like, a lot of people right now are talking about local organizing. I think a lot of people don't know how to get involved. And at least in LA, there's a few different interfaith networks. LA, not as impressive because LA has no weather, as we've established, but we had a parallel action on Friday at the same time as Minneapolis. And yeah, it was just really moving. The head pastor of Westwood went, and I was there, and there were dozens of clergy from across religions, and we went to the detention center and prayed in many different faiths, and it was just a really beautiful display. Yeah, so look into it. And I agree, Blair. I think that is just a really amazing way that people are also coming together across religions.
All right, everybody. We have to let Blair go. We'll wrap up the podcast without Blair. But thank you for hopping on for just and giving us your wisdom, Reverend Blair.
Miss y'all. See you later.
All right. So grateful to have Blair for most of this episode, but we are wrapping up. The one last thing we want to just make sure we hit we say, I know Blair had finished by talking about Target, which I thought was hilarious, because Target has literally lost billions of dollars by choosing to be on the wrong side of history. Like billions with a B. That's just sometimes I'd be yeah.
And at least 500 of those are mine. Yeah, I haven't gone for a year.
I literally, and I didn't talk about it. I didn't join any sort of, I just lost all heart to go.
Yep.
And that is saying something, because for the last 30 years of my life, I have gone to Target at least once a week and not left without spending $100. And they really took the joy out of they killed it for me.
I made it through the Christmas season without going to Target, so they are never getting me back.
Yeah.
I am gone.
Yeah. It is what did they say? They screwed the pooch? I don't even know, man. I
say that, and other people say that as well. But yes,
I know you do say that, Julie. That's where it is. Yeah, and then this is why I'm sometimes I'm you're doing capitalism wrong. You ain't even capitalism the right kind of way, man. When you start doing this kind of stuff, it don't make no sense. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. That Target, if I were them, economically, it makes more sense to them to actually pivot. The other thing that we're seeing in terms of resistance that I want to give a quick shout out to one of our listeners, Ben, and I'm going to put his Substack in the show notes. I know we're talking about what's happening in Minnesota, but the next place ISIS seemingly showed up in disproportionate numbers is Maine. And Ben is one of our listeners who's a former military veteran. And he was the one that actually really helped shape our episode when we talked about Charlie Kirk through just an amazing email. And he has his Substack where he writes about like how people's response to do nothing is a kind of numbness that really correlates to hate. And it's such a good Substack. Like, it's going to be in the chat. You need to read it. It's really, really good because I think there has to be something numb in you to not feel what we're talking about in terms of what's happening. And I also think that's a part of what some people that have decided to join ICE live in, that numbness, right? They've decided to numb themselves to the pain and suffering they're causing and only have proximate feelings through violence. And as a consequence, there's all this data showing right now that they are depressed. They are sad.
Good.
It says that their moral
Good.
their morale is at an all-time low, Julia.
Good.
Woohoo.
Good. I hope that, I mean, it's like, what, there's nothing else to say, you know? I hope, it doesn't matter what I hope, but I do anticipate if any of them are married that they won't stay married for long. I also anticipate them not getting the money that they think that they're going to be getting. I anticipate
no way.
Like having them, this is going to hang, first of all, it's going to hang over their heads for the rest of their lives. Like, I have come to this place, you know, I'm not like you guys. You guys are very not hopeful. Like, you guys see good
optimistic
in people.
Yes.
I just don't. Like, I genuinely and sincerely just think that most of these people and like their kind of like apathy towards it is because they're terrible and really self-centered. But I know that irrespective of how long this goes on, some people will survive it. There will be an after this, and I can't wait. Like, I do not believe that J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, maybe Stephen Miller, but like Donald Trump, these people will never face consequences. But do you want to know who will? These ICE agents. They're going to jail. They're going to jail. They are going to jail. They will be socially shunned. If they ever do get married, they won't be married for long. Their children will hate them. Everywhere they go, they will be disdained. And I look forward to that. And every single person who has supported it, I don't care, like, every single person, you will never live it down. Not with me. Y'all are out here putting these videos up, being proud, saying crazy things, hateful things. That's fine. I hear you. I see you. # never forget. Okay?
Okay, so that's Julia. The pod does not endorse that, to be clear. Hanging on by a thread to the Christian label here, but I hear that. I validate your frustration.
Try Jesus, not me.
Yeah. You know, that I've been thinking about, I believe God's grace is big enough for everyone. And I believe that if we personally do not have room to have grace for the people that we see enacting these atrocities, that God will forgive us for that as well.
Thank you. To be clear, I also believe that God's grace is, but I'm not God.
Yeah. Right. I pray for them every day. I pray for their hearts to break open.
You pray for me.
I pray for you.
We do. Trust me. We do.
I am truly not, there is no shame around the anger and the feelings of vengeance. I just wanted to reground us a little bit.
Disgust is more of like,
feelings of disgust. I think.
But no, Everest, you had mentioned that you had found a Reddit thread where people were also voicing their
personal
people they're related to. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I wish I could remember the r/. I'll find it. We can put it in the show notes. But there's a question that I saw on Reddit that was to friends and family of ICE agents. How do you feel about what they're doing? And the answers that stayed with me the most actually were more about the numbness. There were a lot of people that said they had relatives that had been in some kind of border enforcement prior to it being so intensely militarized. And over the years, they've watched them kind of become extremely disillusioned with their job. And they went from actually going after people who were allegedly causing issues or were dangers to their communities to going after people who have been in the country for decades and like just like easy targets, being the people that are actually not a danger to anyone. And also, I think I read a lot of comments that were just about watching the hardening happen, because I'm going to say again, I just think that naturally this is not how humans act towards each other. This is not a normal way to be going about your life. I think that if you're going out into the streets every day and you're breaking up communities and breaking up families and you're hearing people scream and you're hearing people cry and you're having to just keep doing that and telling yourself that you're just doing a job, I really think that that would break you in a way. And that is the thing that I also saw as a pattern, was people saying that they had kind of watched the hardening happen and it had crept into other parts of their life, that there's like less joy, less compassion, less humanity, it seems like.
It stains your soul. It's like a Horcrux.
I mean, it is. It is, and I do think that. I mean, it's a helpful analogy. I think the difficult part. I mean, Everest, neurobiologically, actually, we know it, or I should say, evolutionary science suggests and has proven that we are born, we have a compassionate core. That's why our species of humans lived. Now, Julia, what I think you're talking about, and what Everest, I think you could, I guess what I should say, where I land on this between you two, is if you even look at what Allie Beth Stuckey, as an example, the empathy is a sin queen herself, she is posting basically that the reason people have a problem with what ICE is doing is because they aren't showing ICE opening the doors for people or doing anything polite and helping people. And I'm like, they ain't showing pictures of it because that ain't what they doing, right? Like, that's why they ain't putting them videos out there. But the problem is, Everest, is the challenge, I should just say, we have to overcome, is you're dealing with literally, one might say within an American context, since the founding of America, with the genocide of indigenous people and the enslavement of black people, there's been a movement to name what she has called empathy as a sin, to numb yourself. And so you deal with generations of people who have said, no, to feel something for someone else is it's sinful, right? And so that disrupts their entire theological worldview. And so that's where I think the difficulty where we're at. And so again, we shouldn't be surprised that these people are sad and the morale is at all time low.
The thing that gets me through the day, this is dark, but is knowing that the people who carry out these atrocities feel no love, no joy, no sense of inner peace. They lack not just humanity, but like they are lacking the experience of being human, the thing that makes, like,
they're lacking being loved, I think, actually.
They're lacking what?
They're lacking being loved, and that's what makes you feel alive.
Yes, they are so hardened that they cannot feel the God inside of them, and that means that they suffer in a way that's why they can carry out these atrocities, because they want people to suffer the way that they suffer. But even when they are doing the most atrocious things to people who know and love God and like love community and are well loved, they are still suffering more. And that gives me a sense of peace. That for me is like some sort of justice, is knowing that like when Stephen Miller lays his head down at night, he knows no peace. There's knows no love.
That is so, yeah. Okay, and I agree. And I also want to say that, or I agree that there is like a profound brokenness of spirit that has to be coming from that. And I also want to say I have experienced a lot of the people in our community, a lot of Christian people, really struggling with kind of the feelings that Julia is articulating, and struggling with feeling like a lot of hatred and feeling themselves harden towards huge groups of people. And I just want to say that even as I am sitting here and saying like, I pray for their hearts to break open. That is like the best that I can do. I try so hard to remember that God's grace includes them as well. I think it's also important to think about who are we actually called to serve and to love and to heal right now. And I think if we are spending too much of our time and too much of our energy thinking about how we feel about the perpetrators of oppression, we are wasting energy that could be used loving and serving. And so to the people, to our listeners, to myself, who are really struggling with the hatred and disgust and anger that they're feeling, I would invite you to feel it. Don't feel shame about it. Try to release it and try to redirect it into the place where your feet are and the people that your hands can actually reach, because the way that we feel about them actually doesn't matter. I don't think, like, it's not impacting them. If you are feeling a lot of shame and guilt about feeling hatred, that's not serving anyone. That's not serving you. That's not hurting them. That's not helping the people that you could be helping, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to, that's how I've been kind of processing.
No,
this.
I think that makes sense.
Wise.
I think that makes sense. I want us to wrap up by getting to some of the good news that some actual additional good news to all the organizing happening in Minnesota. Some things have happened on the ground we want to lift up before we end the show. Last night, a federal judge summoned the head of ICE to appear in federal court on Friday to defend why he should not be held in contempt of court for violating court orders. And Democrats are threatening to start impeachment hearings against Kristi Noem, which I wish they would actually follow through on something. Lord, please hear my prayer. The U.S. House and Senate have negotiated final appropriations bills to fund the federal government through September 30th, and they all have been stripped of their anti-trans provisions because there were some really bad ones about even trans people not being able to like have the right to bear arms. And so we want to, if Sarah McBride ever gets on our podcast, I would probably pass out. But shout out to Sarah McBride for doing that hard work as a representative. Sarah's an excellent example of the way she talks around coalition building is just, I find, amazing. It's so inspirational. And the last one we have is photographer John Abernathy threw his $9,000 camera to another photographer to protect the photos he took from ICE while he was being beaten. The other photographer caught it, and the camera is undamaged and his photos were saved. We have some of the most incredible photojournalism we've ever seen because of him and his other photographer. And so we will put some
it's
of
so metal. It's so cool.
It's
photo
of
the year.
Yeah. So,
Wild.
it probably is going to up on times, which is just what needs to happen. The last thing I'll say, and then I want to wrap up, is I meant to say this earlier, and we'll put it in the show notes. Everest and Blair, we're talking about news sources and fake news, all that stuff in terms of how people, what did you call it, Everest?
Misinformation.
Lies.
The lies is what I said. So there's a resource that I go to, a website that I go to, and I'll put this in the chat. Maybe I should have said this in the beginning when this was relevant, but I want to say it. People don't know about it. It's called Ground News. That's really, really good. Unfortunately, you have to subscribe to it, but basically it tells you which news sources you're reading, if like where they lean politically. And I think the challenge you have, Everest, is like you have to teach how we teach kids to be able to read something and know where the bias is, right? And that's a skill that I'm still teaching to grad students. But that's where we're at, and Ground News actually does that work for you in a way that I actually find really helpful. So if you want to know more about that, they're not sponsoring us. It'd be great if they did, but we're not looking for sponsors, but I'm not going to turn down some sponsorship money. I'll tell you that. So we're not looking for it, but if you want to, if you're looking for a Christian podcast to promote, help fund, we're open for business. Thanks for joining us for the Progressive Christians podcast. The Progressive Christian podcast is a ministry of The Loft, a worship community of Westwood United Methodist Church. If you'd like to connect with us and be part of the conversation, you can find us on all social media platforms at The Progressive Christians. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. And our email address is progressivechristians@theloftla.org. Our show is produced by our amazing producer, Spencer, and it is mixed and edited by our wonderful audio engineer, AJ. If you like the show, please rate, review, share, subscribe to us on whatever platform you are using. Thanks for listening, and we will see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Alongside the ledger of atrocity, I keep another. The Palestinian doctor who would not abandon his patients even as the bombs closed in. The Icelandic writer who raised money to get the displaced out of Gaza. The American doctors and nurses who risked their lives to go treat the wounded in the middle of a killing field. The puppet maker who, injured and driven from his home, kept making dolls to entertain the children. The congresswoman who stood her ground in the face of censure, of constant vitriol, of her own colleagues' indifference. The protesters, the ones who gave up their privilege, their jobs, who risked something to speak out. The people who filmed and photographed and documented all this, even as it happened to them, even as they buried their dead. It is not so hard to believe, even during the worst of things, that courage is the more potent contagion, that there are more invested in solidarity than annihilation, that just as it has always been possible to look away, it is always possible to stop looking away. None of this evil was ever necessary. And I just love that. I think it's beautiful, and it is something that I have been trying to practice. I think it's something that we did well today, of kind of the parallel ledger of the hope that we witness and the courage and the constant resistance that is always present when horrible things are going on.